Hello and welcome to another repair video. Today we will be having a look at the JVC HRD860EK. Now this was one of the better machines made by JVC. I have owned one of these in the past. What we will be doing today is having a look at what are the common faults that occur with this kind of design, and I'll be explaining to you the remedies what you can go ahead with doing, and we'll be stripping it down, cleaning the heads, and then testing the actual unit just to make sure that it's working properly. I'll try and make this an hour's video, but it may be even shorter because I've done this so many times in my repair life. So what we'll do is we'll have a go at opening the item, and we'll have a look inside, and we'll go on from there. It's a nice sunny day today. Went out for a walk. Also my screwdrivers. Got a few light splashes to the unit. Obviously, what I always like to keep is a little box where I can just keep all my screws and what have you. To be quite fair, there's nothing really that much that goes wrong with these machines. I mean anything that does go wrong is repairable, and they're actually made quite well. So I do actually prefer these, but I think, you know, compared to what you got in the modern times, I think this is one of the better machines, and it's actually quite difficult to find one of these now, especially working on eBay, or if someone's selling one of these. I mean, the picture quality obviously is very good. I have found that JVC machines actually do produce a very good picture, no matter what model you have, provided they're actually working properly. If something isn't working properly, then obviously you will run into issues, but that doesn't mean it's not repairable. So we'll be going through as many machines as we can over this times. Right, so here we have our unit here. Now, as you can see here, so here's our main board. This is which houses most of the electronics opposed to control, servo, power supply, picture. As this is a hi-fi unit, we have a separate hi-fi board here, and underneath that we have the control board. Here we have the power supply, and this is obviously the cassette mechanism, and we've got our front panel with the circuitry attached to it. Now most of the devices which I have serviced actually have the circuit board actually clipped on or screwed onto to the actual unit itself, but JVC on some of them have actually made that once you pull this front panel off, which we will do, it actually brings the circuitry with it as well. So, you know, so what we'll do, we'll I used to own one of these back in the days, in the late 90s. It was actually quite a nice unit, to be honest with you. It was quite a actually quite an enjoyable unit to actually own, because it gave you the quality which was required, and it was quite reliable. Now, one thing to note very carefully is that there's a screw on the back here that holds the back plate on. Now, I've seen a lot of people do not know that that screw is there. Now, I've taken off all the screws here to take this board out. Now, this screw is actually missing on this one, so obviously someone's been in it, but if you were to leave that screw in and you would try and lift this board, if you use too much force, then you would crack the board here, because there's no way of it actually coming off because it's attached to the unit. So these are very, very nice units to work on. As you can see here, all you have to do is just lift it up slightly here, and then you've got the same posts that hold the unit down when it sits flat are used to hold the unit, the circuit board, like this, so that you can actually see everything. Isn't that cool? Right, so what we will do is we'll take this off. Now there's a screw right there, so please be aware of this screw. They were really well made, these units, really well made, and I really enjoyed working on every JVC unit in my lifetime. Now, here's the head drum. It's a 4-head unit. Might need a little bit of cleaning, which I will show you exactly how to clean the heads. Now, I'm going to strip this down a little bit more further, because I want you to really understand what actually goes wrong on these machines. I've actually already repaired this myself. I did have another machine which obviously I broke away for parts, but this one I've actually kept because it's in better condition, and I'm thinking of using this myself for my work. So, best thing to do, first of all, if you want to open the front panel out, you take these little clips off. Okay, once they go click, then you can see this moves, and then you can just hold the cassette door open. Okay, now this is what I was talking to you about. Okay, so most of the circuitry actually comes with it. So what I normally do is I would lift this up and I would just place it very carefully there. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is take this cassette loader out. Now what you might need to do, there's 2 screws under here which need to be removed, and the only way that you're going to be able to get to them is if you push these two forward and push the cassette basket forward, then you can put your screwdriver through these two screws holes and undo the screws. And then it's just a matter of lifting it out. There's no plugs with this, so okay, now I think the screws are just attached to it, so just be very careful. We'll put this aside for now. Now here we have our mechanism. So what we have here so this is your cassette deck mechanism, your video deck mechanism. This is what actually is the workings of the unit. So these two are the spools. Okay, if I get a cassette, I can explain to you. So here we have the cassette that we're all used to, VHS cassette. Now we've got two little holes here. Now you may be wondering what these actually are. Now these are actually holes where these two spools go into. Okay. Now VCRs differ from design, but the basic principle is the same. Okay, I'm just explaining it to you on this deck, but there are obviously other VCRs as well which use the same kind of idea but made differently. Right, so this is what you call the supply spool, and this is because the tape runs in this direction, so from left to right. Okay, as your audio cassette is from right to left, okay, this is the other way around. Now this is your supply spool and this is your take-up spool. So the tape, the first port of contact with the tape is going to be with these two things here. Now they're called loading arms. So here, once you insert the tape and you press play, the tape gets wrapped around the spinning head drum to make a U-type loading. Now the first protocol is this is what you call the supply guide, the entry guide. Now we have our full erase head here, so this is where once you do recording it will erase the previous recording, so you can record on a new do a new recording. So the tape hits the full erase head, then it gets wrapped around the head. Now as you can see, the head is actually in the tilt, so the tape information gets written like this. Okay, now this is what you call the back tension band. Okay, now your back tension gives you a little bit of resistance so that the tape can be rigid against the head, otherwise the head won't be able to read it properly. And now this is also very important because the tape will obviously have to be at a certain tension so that the head can read the information of the tape correctly. Okay. Now, the same thing happens on the right hand side. Now this is what you call the exit guide. Now the exit guide will then hold the tape so that it then gets placed next to the audio and control head, which is this one here. Now this is your audio and control head. This is where your sound comes in. So this head is actually producing your video, and this head is actually producing your picking up your audio, and it also reads the control track of the head, of the tape. Now that is used for synchronization. Now in later videos I'll explain to you about synchronization and the pulses and the lock and etc. But I just want to give you a basic insight about what you're actually looking at when you're looking at a video. And then obviously some VCRs don't actually have this kind of arrangement. This is mainly in later VCRs that they had this arrangement. Then we have our pinch roller and your capstan shaft, which obviously pull the tape when you press play. Okay, and then the tape goes back into the cassette, on the take-up supply. So then what happens is this turns and then takes up the tape. Now we have brakes here. The brakes are very important. Obviously, whatever's got to start has got to stop as well. So that is obviously used. Obviously, when you're doing fast forward and rewind, you press stop. It stops immediately. Obviously, these brakes come into force. Now, what actually drives these two spools? Now, you have something called an idler here. Now, I'm going to take this idler off, and I'm actually going to explain to you with this kind of deck. This is one of the problems that do occur, I have found. This is one of the problems that do occur. Now, here, this one here is your idler. Okay. Now, this is being driven by your capstan motor underneath here. Now, you can see a gear underneath here. Now, this is supposed to be swinging like this. Okay, very freely. And what happens is, if you don't use your VCR for a very long time, things get gummed up. Okay, and this is one of the things that gets gummed up. And what happens is, here underneath the shaft, your grease dries out, and once the grease dries out, then this doesn't happen. And obviously, when you put your tape in, tape's not being driven back into the cassette, which I'll show you once I power this up. Then the tape gets chewed up, and then you will have your prize recordings damaged. So, I mean, this is a later design where you have a gear assembly. Now, most of the earlier units had rubber idlers. Now, they were even more unreliable. If they wore out, then obviously you will need to replace them. So let's put this back in. Just drops in there like that. As I said, I've been doing this all my life, so I mean, ever over tighten these screws, because it's just, you know. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the head drum, clean the tape path, so that when we make a test, when we do a test on this, if everything else is working, then we'll get a picture. Okay. Now, the easiest way of cleaning the heads, if you've opened your machine up, is by this method here, which I'm about to show you. Take a piece of paper, okay, fold it in half like that. So make something like this, doesn't have to be exact. Okay, and take some isopropyl IPA, spray that on there. Okay, and then get out of the way here. Place it against the head and rotate the head in the direction of travel. This head is surprisingly clean. Now this is called the upper drum. Okay, this is the upper drum which actually rotates. This is the lower drum at the bottom here. And then you have the head chips attached to the actual upper drum which actually rotates. Actually, they're called flying heads. Okay, now the second thing that always I recommend doing is cleaning the tape path. Now how would you do that? Well, take a Q-tip. You have to be very careful with the Q-tip. Spray some alcohol on it. Okay, just dip it with alcohol. And just be careful not to damage any of the heads. And just use this part here, the flat bit, go right along the tape path here. Getting rid of any, and then turn your over. Okay, you can use the same one again. So anything that the tape touches, just give it a clean. Okay, if you feel that your Q-tip has dried out, okay, so here we are. Doesn't take long to do anyway. You don't have to use any brutal force. Clean the audio control head. I don't really recommend using cleaning tapes, because they just do more harm than good. Then we can just clean the pinch roller as well. I mean, that's what will accumulate more dirt, because okay, then the caps and shaft underneath there needs to be cleaned. Okay, that's just a basic procedure on how to clean the tape path. Okay, now what we're going to do now is we're actually going to place our tape loader back on. Now, as I've moved it, I would recommend just getting the mechanism back where it was. Okay. Okay. So it just drops in place like that. Make sure it's sitting properly. Front 2 screws first of all. Right, so that's the tape loader in. Now we have to put our front panel back. Just make sure all the wires are actually... Now, here's a little trick with every VCR that has a door on it. Some VCRs have doors broken, but if you have a door that's attached to the actual main chassis, what you can do is you have to lift it and then one by one put all the prongs back in. Might be a little fiddly. No, that's why. Okay. Just make sure. Yep. Okay, so now what you can do is you can, a lot of people what they do is they go bang like that. Please don't do that. Be gentle, it's plastic. until they all click into place, like that. Okay, so now it's all back in place. So now we are ready for a power up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to power this one up, and we're going to put a tape in there, and we'll actually show it to you actually running. So I'm not going to connect it to the TV just yet, but I'm actually due to be receiving a delivery, so if you'd just like to excuse me for a minute while I just go out and get my delivery in. Yeah, that's right.
Alright.
Thank you.
You're not putting it in?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. Right. Right, so the power's on. Right, so now the tape is loaded and it's playing. Right, I'm going to take the camera off the tripod, and I'm actually going to show it to you how the mechanism actually works. So here we are. Right, so the tape is about to go in. Right, so it half loads because it's a modern unit. Okay, and this is what happens when you press play. So now, as you can see, it's playing a tape. So the tape gets pulled out of this spool, goes on the full arrays head, entry guide wrapped around the head, exit guide, audio head, pinch roller, and then back into the machine. Okay, so when you press fast forward, first of all the machine recognizes what kind of tape you've got in there. Okay, so now as you can see, the tape's fast forwarding, so it's going from the left and getting spooled up into the right hand side. Okay. With the rewind is the opposite, this way. Here we are. So the tape is getting unspooled from this side and it gets spooled over to the left hand spool. And that clicking sound you can actually hear is the actual brakes. Those are the brakes which I was talking about. Right, I'll put you back on the tripod. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the machine back together, because there's nothing really else I can show you on this on the top side. So put the shield back on. Okay, so now the shield is on. Now what we can do is we can put the cover back on. That just drops into place like that. It's actually quite neat, to be honest with you. So let's get the right screws in the right places. There's a few screws which are actually in the wrong, which are the wrong type, which I've got to change them back. Okay, let me see if I've got any spare screws. Okay, so I always keep some spares. No. I think I need one more for that. And what we'll do is very quickly we'll have a look at the underside of this machine, and I'll show you what can go wrong underneath, because whatever can go wrong on the top equally can go wrong on the bottom as well. So that will just give you an insight of what goes on down there. So here we are, get another screw in there. Make sure all the wires are actually in the right, down in there. And lastly, what I would like to do is, as I explained to you before, there's a screw in there that needs to go in, which is a black one. So this screw will need to be placed in here. Alright, so now what we'll do is we'll just turn the machine upside down. Ah, that's what it is. That screw's in the wrong place, you see. I'll just move the camera up so that you can see it better. There you go. Now that screw's in the wrong place, so whoever worked on this machine didn't put the screw in the right place. Either lost the screw. Let's just quickly open the bottom. Yeah, these screws are completely wrong. Don't really know where these have actually come from in the actual unit itself. Right, so we just have to be very careful. Just, have I missed a screw? No. There you go. Right, so here is the underside of the unit. Now, there's a lot of mechanics that goes on underneath here, so we won't really go into that because there's a lot here that is going on. But one of the main issues that I've found with these VCRs, I've actually been quite lucky. This gear here breaks. Now this is a nylon gear, and what happens is it splits. Now this is actually on the shaft of the capstan. This actually rotates like this, this is what moves the idler. So whatever gear underneath there is moving the main cam gear underneath there is moving that idler, what I explained to you before. Now that's the head drum motor, and this is your plate assembly here. Now what also happens here, which I found, that the teeth on the ends of this plate assembly get mashed up, and what happens then is the guides don't load. Here we have a mode encoder switch. Now that's a switch that will tell the actual microprocessor where in which position the mechanism is actually at. So if that gets oxidized, then you'll get erratic results where the microprocessor doesn't know what position the mechanism is at. And then you've got various sensors underneath here. You've got a tape sensor that has a look at the rotation of the tape. Obviously, if the tape is not running, then it will go into shutdown. Okay. Now, one thing I forgot to explain. Let's turn it over. Now, here we have. It's probably a bit difficult to explain as I put it back together, but here we have an LED infrared lamp here, and the older machines used to have a incandescent light bulb, but this is a modern machine, so it doesn't have that. So this emits infrared rays to the left sensor and the right sensor. So this is your end sensor, and this is your start sensor. Okay. Now this is your end sensor, right? So when the tape is at the start, there will be a clear leader on the end of the tapes. This will be signaling the start of the tape, and this will be signaling the end of the tape. Now if I show you here, that is where it goes into, right there. Okay, now that's the actual tape. Okay, and we've got a hole here and we've got a hole here, so whatever end the tape is at, we have at both ends we have a clear leader tape. Now this tape is black, so the light cannot shine through this tape, but once it's clear, the light will shine through here at whatever sensor it's at, and it will trigger that sensor. So if the tape is at the start, it will trigger this one, sorry, and if it's at the end, it will trigger this one. Quite simple. And some of the older machines used to have incandescent light bulbs, as I mentioned earlier, and they used to burn out, and then it had no functions at all because the microprocessor detected an error. Okay, finally, clutch assembly here. This also gets gummed up if you don't use your recorder for a long time. It gets gummed up. And lastly, on this machine, on this deck, we have, you probably can't see it from here, but we have a little capacitor right at the end here. Now that is responsible for head switching. Now when your head switching occurs, then obviously the heads actually operate at the right time. If that capacitor goes dry or goes faulty, then you will either have lines on the picture, half a picture, or even no picture at all. So what we will be doing lastly, after I put this all back together, is we will be connecting it up to the television and we'll be seeing if we actually have a picture or whether we have a fault. So just give me a minute, we'll put it back together. Before I do, wouldn't mind giving it a bit of a wipe with the antibacterial to get rid of any germs or whatever you're underneath here. As I said, the VCR might have a fault, but if it does, then we can make a separate video and I can show you how to repair that. What I'm thinking is that capacitor might have gone dry or open or even short circuit. Capacitors do actually go short as well as open. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll put the machine back together. Is that the right way? I think what might be a good idea is for me to put it flat on the ground to make it easier for me to put it back together. Now, just be very gentle because you've got circuitry on the other side. Okay, let's just move you so that you know. Right, so let's just okay. There's just little clips in there, and sometimes I'm reluctant to go in. Once it all clicks into place, then you can start putting some screws in. Now, I'm actually going to put the right screws on there. I think I probably need one more. I always keep some spare screws just in case I need them. Right, now to put the feet on. Right. Right. Now we put the top cover back on. I always start with the screw on the back. I mean, hopefully it will work. But if it doesn't, then we'll make separate videos on how to repair it. Right. Right, so what we'll do now is we'll connect it up to the television. Now I've got a few tapes, I don't know what's on them, but okay, so here we have our connections. We have your RF in. Obviously there's no analog TV anymore, so ignore that. We'll put the test signal on. Okay, little switch there.